In this video, let's take a look at some of the ideas of Assignment 4.2, Human Demographics. So let's test your trivia knowledge. Rank the countries from largest to smallest population size. Hit pause on your player. Alright, welcome back. So we got China, India, US, Indonesia, and then Brazil. So you should know these top 5 countries. And we can see that India and China both have about 3 or 4 times more population than the US. The US coming in right around 300 million, and India and China over 1.1 billion to 1.3 billion. 3 or 4 times more. We can see global population took a huge spike in the last 200 years. And we attribute this to the Industrial Revolution, which dramatically changed not only our medical care, but also our ability to grow food. And we see for most of human history, population was growing just very slowly, and a little dip there with the Black Death of the plague in Europe that wiped out about a third to a half of the inhabitants. So we see here world population growth and growth rate. So blue is population size. This is looking at just the 1900s into the 2000s. And we can see that at the early 1900s, the population size on the planet was about 1.6 billion. And it's increased continuously since then. Right now, our population size 2015 is about 7 billion, actually slightly over. And then the rest of these numbers is projection. But we have a big thing that happened here in the early 70s. We have what we call an inflection point, where it's kept getting bigger but at a ever decreasing rate. So below this, we can see the population growth was curving upwards, and then from this point forward it kind of begins to curve downward. That's not a major point. I'm not going to quiz you on that inflection point, but we can look at this graph and we can see that the population growth rate peaked in the 1960s at 2.25%, and since then it's been decreasing. Right now it's about 1%. And it's the same graph saying the same thing. So population growth rate by country, what probably stands out to you first is that this part in red is an area where we are actually seeing a negative population change. So here population sizes are shrinking. This is in Eastern Europe. Many of these countries are part of the former Soviet Union. And then we have Africa, where we see the greatest increases in population. Largest growth rates, 3% in some cases. So this goes back to fertility rates. And in Africa, we see the highest fertility rates. This means the number of children born per woman on average, 5.1. Europe is the lowest. Europe is 1.4. And it's significant for anything less than 2.1. That means that the fertility rate is below replacement fertility rate. Replacement fertility rate is how many children women should have so that the population stabilizes. And 2.1 is that number, because if you have fewer than 2 children, you don't have enough children to replace you as you and your mate die. And the 0.1 comes from the fact that not all children will go on to have offspring, or might die before they reach reproductive age. So Europe is the lowest, Africa is the highest. North America is right around replacement fertility rate. But Asia and Latin America, we also see them being high, but not as high as Africa. So most of the population growth is going to be in poorer countries that are going through the stages of becoming developed countries. So they're what we would call developing. And basically, you can divide countries now into either developing countries or developed countries. And we're going to take a look at some of those transitions in the next part of this video. In the next video, part 2. But I want to just draw attention to this. 98% of the next billion people born will be living in developing nations. That's where the big growth is. And this is just showing some trends in China, how their fertility rate used to be very high in the 1950s, and then they got it down to 1.6 through their one-child policy. And some other things that we can see here: rate of natural population increase. This is another term you should know. Natural is referring to just that happening because of birth and deaths, not immigration, people coming into the country, not immigration, people going out. And so we can see their population, natural population increase is only 0.6%. This data is obviously about 10 years old, but we can we get these bottom numbers here by using rule of 70. So 70 divided by 0.6 gives you 117 years. One noteworthy example here is Bangladesh, that in the 60s had a total fertility rate of over 7 children per woman, and nowadays it's gone down to about 3.0, and that's a huge shift that was achieved through family planning and education. So when you educate women, you delay the rate, or you delay the age at which they have children, and that often will also result in them having fewer children. And through family planning, you're also teaching them about contraception. So a little trivia: global population growth rate is closest to 1%, and 2% is the highest it got in the 1960s. Which of these following statements are true? This is multiple marks, so go ahead and pause and decide for yourself. Alright, welcome back. So only B and C are true. B, the global population size is increasing, and that's true, but at a decreasing rate. And C is also true. And A is not true, the rate is decreasing, and D is not true, because these populations will actually grow more quickly when you have more young people. So true or false? A country with a decreasing birth rate will have a decreasing population size. Alright, so if you said false, that's correct. There are 3 possible reasons. The population can still be getting bigger, just at a slower rate. The population can be getting smaller because of emigration. That would be people leaving the country. The population can still be getting bigger because of population momentum. This means fewer babies are born today. That won't decrease the population until the older, bigger generations start dying off. And here we see what we call age structure diagrams, sometimes also referred to as population pyramids. Although we can see here, number 4, this isn't much of a pyramid. The other 3 look like it. And so rank them from fastest to slowest population growth. So we can see the fastest growth is happening here because we have the greatest number of young. Second fastest here, and then slowest growth here, becoming more straight. And the more this is like a column, the slower the growth. And if we get a top-heavy graph or diagram, then this is actually indicating a shrinking population, as we have fewer people in their reproductive age. So we should note why we have 3 different colors here. This is pre-reproductive age, so 0 to 15. Reproductive age, 15 to say 45. And then post-reproductive age. We'll come back to those in class. Let's take a look at the influence of gender. So sex ratios. A population's sex ratio can affect its growth rate. And the naturally occurring sex ratio in humans is actually 105 to 106 males for every 100 females. And this may be an evolutionary adaptation, as males are slightly more prone to death at any given age. And the ratio of men to women is therefore approximately equal at reproductive age. So when we look at these age structure diagrams, we can see, in this case, something that we call a graying population. So this is China in 2005, and we can see that they have a bulge of people in their reproductive years, but not as many in their pre-reproductive years. So fast forward 25 years, those people who were in their pre-reproductive ages are now going to be in their reproductive ages. Those who were in their reproductive ages will now be in their post-reproductive ages. So that bulge moves upward. This can create some problems for countries, because many elderly and few young workers means less tax money for social services for retirees. It's basically the young people who are working that are making the money to support the older people. We see a similar effect happening in our country with our baby boomer generation. These are people who were born shortly after World War II, when soldiers were returning. And right now, these individuals are mostly in their 60s. And we do see a bulge in our human demographics for the U.S. And we'll see that bulge continuing to move up as the years progress. Okay, let me see, we've already gone over, yeah, so population density and distribution. Not only are we interested in where are the largest populations, but also where are they, how are they distributed. And so when we look at this graph here, we can see that the areas that have the greatest density, meaning the most number of people per, say, square mile, is in Southeast Asia. And what is the most common density-dependent cause of death worldwide? So go ahead and pause it. So if you said E, that is the correct answer. And some infectious diseases are malaria, carried by mosquitoes, hepatitis, which is a virus that affects the liver, and tuberculosis, which is a bacteria that affects the lungs. And all three of those can become more prevalent when people are living closer together. Okay, that's the end of part 1.